Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I wanted to talk about how to learn anything as a software engineer. You know, a lot of people get stuck in this kind of tutorial land type of deal or struggle to pick up new skills or really feel like they're able to use them. And so I wanted to reflect a little bit on my experiences and draw some principles from my past struggles in hopes that it might help you to pick up new technology more quickly. So as I mentioned, the most common failure mode I see in new engineers trying to pick up new technology is to take a course online and feel like, okay, I know XYZ technology now. So we convince ourselves that we know this technology, but we can't actually put it into practice because all we've been doing is a simple code along with an instructor and we're not actually having to internalize anything. So that is where you don't want to be. So what is the opposite of that? Or what are some tactics that you can use in order to avoid that type of failure? So I'm going to go through 3 tactics now. Here they are. Okay, so I like medicine, I like reading about medicine, and there's this really famous doctor named Atul Gawande, and he talks about in one of his books how as a medical resident, a lot of times the pattern is see, do, teach. So say you're putting a central line in or you're doing a surgical procedure, you see one, you do one, and then you teach one. And so there's no waiting around, seeing a bunch of things, you know. You see one and then you're doing, and that is kind of the pattern we want to follow. So for example, you don't want to take 3 courses on React Native, you want to take 1 course on React Native, and as soon as you're able to start building something, you want to start building. So that is the do part. The teach part is maybe optional because we're not in a hospital trying to teach residents to not kill people, but if you can teach, all the better. Everybody says that teaching cements concepts in your mind. As a former high school teacher, I would agree with that. And so if you can write a blog post about something you learned, that's going to be a big win. If you can show somebody a new technique, that's going to be great. And the best thing is for people who are recently beginners to teach beginners because they remember what it was like learning for the first time. So see, do, teach. Don't hang out in tutorial land, start building as soon as possible. That's number 1. Okay, so number 2 is use the 80-20 principle. And you may be asking, what is the 80-20 principle? And that is also known as the Pareto principle. Basically this idea that 80% of the outputs are due to 20% of the inputs. So basically what that means is there's a very small subset of activities that have huge upside and kind of a compounding effect. So you want to double down on that 20% that is working. And as far as that pertains to learning new technology, I think it applies in a lot of areas of life. One of those is that I would say 80% of using a new technology is using 20% of the API. So let's take Redux, for example. Redux was one of those things that I struggled to learn, that I was really intimidated by, and was never quite sure how I was going to learn it. But at the end of the day, it has 3 main concepts, I would say. So 3 pieces of the API that are basically the majority of what you need to know. So that would be store, action, and reducer. And so I think a lot of technology or like libraries or stuff that seems hard can be boiled down to a kind of core set of things that you need to learn in order to be productive. And so I would focus on figuring out what those are and then just learning those relentlessly. And so that would be an example of applying the 80-20 principle to learning new technology. Okay, my 3rd piece of advice is that everything is a pattern. So a boss gave me a piece of advice once. So I was talking about moving from Angular to React. So I started out doing React, did about a year of Angular, and was a little bit nervous to move back into React. I was at a new company that had their own best practices for doing React stuff. And this person said to me, hey, everything is basically patterns, and you just have to learn the patterns. And I found over time that this is actually super true. So everything just comes down to kind of a repeating set of things, and that is why learning the fundamentals is so important. This isn't a video about learning the fundamentals though, so I will leave that for another time. But if you can basically learn a core set of things, as I was kind of saying before with 80-20, you kind of learn the foundation and then the rest is implementation details. So as an example, let's say JavaScript. Okay, so let's say you know the JavaScript fundamentals really, really well. picking up React is not going to be as hard as if you didn't know the fundamentals. And so even if you are starting from scratch with something like a React or a framework, for example, once you get used to kind of the core set of things, you end up seeing these things over and over and over again. You end up learning and kind of adopting new patterns into your tool belt, and then you're able to use those in other places. And so basically what I would say is focus on the core, focus on your foundation, and then you'll see patterns repeat everywhere, and as kind of an implementation detail that you will be well equipped to learn on the fly, on the job, or whatever it is. So I guess we could call this piece of advice, learn the foundations, / look for patterns, / it's all implementation details, but you kind of get my point. Like, the point is that it's not worth stressing over these little fine-grained things about like, oh, this library does this one specific thing in this one certain way. What you want to learn are the broad patterns and the ideas that you can take with you no matter what language or stack you're working in. Okay, so those are my 3 big pieces of advice for how to learn any technology. What do you think? Did I miss something? Are there things that you like to do when you're learning a new technology that would be helpful for people to know? Leave me a comment below. If you're watching this far, you're probably gonna like the rest of my channel, so consider subscribing. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.